Harley-Davidson, they make a motorcycle. They're not putting ads out, right? Trying to solve the problem or let people know, hey, we have a product for you if you struggle with transportation and you don't like to get from here to there on four wheels. We have an option for you. That's not what they sell at all. And that's not really what the function of their marketing is all about.
It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jaime, and we are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries.
Consider it your weekly companion on a path to better work and a better way of working.
For decades, marketing was a department. It sat down the hall, ran ad campaigns, polished the brand, and tried to convince people to buy stuff. But that world, totally gone. Today, whether you like it or not, you are a marketer. If you are building a company, hosting a podcast, writing a book, even just trying to get an idea to spread, you are in the business of marketing. The mistake is thinking marketing is about selling. It's not. It's about creating change. It's about making things matter. So Jonathan, here's where I want to start. If marketing has clearly become something bigger, shaping culture, driving movements, deciding what ideas spread, why do you think it still gets reduced to just advertising and sales?
One of the biggest reasons is if we all look at our balance sheets and finance and whoever's trotting out the P&L and to whatever version you're looking at that, usually the advertising spends the big number. So a lot of times we focus on like the marketing department spends a lot of money, and a lot of times they spend it in this place. And so therefore it's advertising. And I think a lot of that really you kind of got to back up to the fact that that's one of the last things you do is go spend that money to tell the world what you've done. And if you back that up, most of the work is in preparing for that. What product did we build? Who did we build it for? Why is it different, unique? Why does anybody care that we built it in the first place? Who are these people that might want this solution to their whatever problem they might have? And start building the case for, to your point, right? Like, did I build the right company? Did I fill it full of the right people? Am I building the right product? Do I know which customers I'm building it for? And have I prepared myself to take this to the marketplace and say, hey world, this thing exists and these channels are available for us to market them in. And I can start telling my story and start telling it to the right people. And if that takes it in the shape of advertising, it does. But the advertising, the action of advertising and the advertising budget is really at the finish line for when you're getting ready to do your marketing, to take all the work you did to market your product and release it to the world. Sometimes advertising is a lever that you pull to do that. There could be PR and there's other things that you're doing that are in addition to that. That might even be big budget items. But the reality is the entire organization has been focused on building a thing for someone, and that matters, and that I need to be able to articulate that to the world. And that's as I exit my four walls in a marketing function, it's all about that. And advertising can be one piece of that I activate to do. But that is the goal of this is not to run a bunch of ads to hit a bunch of people with it.
Absolutely. And maybe it's helpful to, kick off a little bit with the context that both you and I have served in marketing functions in our careers. We've sat in that seat on the bus. We've had jobs where sometimes the title was really specific to marketing. We've certainly had roles where you are pulled into marketing conversations, no matter what your, title is or the role is, because of just the opportunity or the conversation or the topic. I know that when I reflect back on my own career, I think when I first bumped into the concept of marketing, it was because I actually was in a sales role. If I roll back the tape all the way up, I went to school for music business. I ended up in the music industry in the early 2000s when AOL was spamming my actual mailbox with 40 free hour discs, that whole thing. So that sort of, dates me to a bit. That turned into a job in radio, which was a radio sales job. And I remember at that time, I was really fortunate that I had a mentor, a woman who was the VP of sales for our group, who was really helpful because that was a tough gig. And she was the first person that kind of unlocked this concept of, hey, you're not selling the advertising. Like, it's not really this item like on a shelf that somebody is buying when you're out there calling on a client or a prospect. You are selling the potential for them to bring their products and services to the marketplace to hopefully drive a business outcome. Like, that's really what we're selling here. And I had just never really sat with that idea. I'd never really been exposed to it. I think I took marketing classes in college that weren't even really necessarily about that. We studied In fact, a lot of advertising, which was interesting, but that's where the time was spent. And so fast forward to today, it's one of my most favorite areas to go into because what has always sat with me as foundational with anybody, if you're talking about marketing, kind of what you were just describing is, okay, let's really define what marketing is in the first place. And from my point of view, a definition that has always stuck, or at least helped me make decisions, is trying to encapsulate marketing as the following, where marketing today is entirely about the way you make things, the way you bring them to the marketplace, tell people that they exist, share them with those people, and engage with those people who engage with those things. So that entire journey of I made a thing, I showed up with it, I let people know it was here, I packaged it up a certain way, people start to interact with it. How do I interact with those people that interact with it? That entire bundle of activity is marketing. One of those functions, right, to your point, is advertising. That kind of sits in that bucket of, how do I let people know, that something exists? But that's kind of just my take on it. So if I were to challenge you, I guess, with some of that thinking about we're all in the marketing business, do you think that's valid?
I think the part that you touched on there, it's another version of who did we build this for and why? When we get into marketing, and sometimes I think we even lose track of just the market, when we talk about marketing, there are market segments of people that might fit the need that my product could fill. There's a marketplace where commerce might take place, and people might buy my things or see where my things are. And as we assess that, a lot of times what we're doing in our organizations is, while we're trying to solve problems, we're always trying to solve problems for someone, right? We rarely try and solve the world's problems in one fell swoop. A lot of people do try to do that, but it's very difficult and usually does not work. You need a smaller task than solving the world's problems. And so once you've identified the problem that you're solving and who has that problem, you've started to develop the market, right? You're starting to look, okay, who are these people? What problem do they have that I could fix? And am I uniquely qualified to fix that problem? And if so, where do they gather in order to learn about new things that might solve their problems? And do I have access to those things? It could be, whether it's online ads or, billboards or trade shows or whatever it might be, is understanding where the first movers of those market segments, where do they get their information? Where are they finding out where these solutions to their problem? How much are they going to trust me telling them that story versus someone else telling them that story? So you think about like third parties, like media, PR efforts, things like this. Can I convince influencer people, whether those are true media types or other, online influencer folks, that I have solved this problem for these people and I need to connect with them and let them know that I've done this, and so that they can react to that. So often we're so eager to get to market that we either may not have vetted the problem very well in the first place, or the product or service we built didn't totally solve that problem, or we never really knew how many people there were that had that problem in the first place, and or where they are and what they look like. And that's the real hard work in the marketing lane, right? Is teasing all of that stuff out so that we can go build things that might excite them and put them in the marketplace, whether that's advertising or otherwise. But all too frequently, I think we see organizations that are either building on a hunch and mass targeting a lot of people and then hoping to have good results. And that's a really, really tough hill to climb.
Especially if that entire exercise hasn't been rooted or hasn't started in the exercise of working to understand and identify and empathize with people who have problems. I mean, the things that we make, our products, our services, our art, I mean, they're for people. They're for other people. Like they're not necessarily for, they're not for, the rocks necessarily. So I think there's always that tendency as people who are trying to build a thing, whether it's build a business or, a body of work or whatever, to think that a lot of effort, or you need to be heavy-handed with the creation of your thing, and then you go find the people and you convince them that they need your thing. Like, we made the thing first. When really, I think, at least in my experience, the people who have been really successful at building things that have made an impact, they've spent a lot of time trying to just listen to the marketplace. And they are really good at being receptors for problems and for what people are struggling with or what seems frustrating or broken or inefficient or whatever. And then they spend a lot of time trying to deeply understand the audience. So it's almost like, don't forget, there's an enormous amount of value in understanding the marketplace way before you put pen to paper and go back to the workshop or the lab and go cook a thing. It's way harder to go make a thing and then show up and say, hey, I made this thing, everyone. Look, it's does all this whiz bang stuff. It's great. Now, why don't you want this? All right, well, I'll spend a bunch of ad dollars to convince people that they want this. And I'm sure we can find examples where people have done that before. I mean, the early days of direct advertising, whether it's the ShamWow or the Slap Chop or Color Coat 3000 or any like, infomercial thing. I mean, that's an enormous part of what the direct advertiser was doing. Direct response advertiser, right? Was at least showing up and just over and over and over again and trying to drive urgency and urgency and urgency, get you to take an action that maybe wasn't rooted in kind of understanding your needs first and foremost. Clearly there are pain points wrapped in there, but that's a different exercise, I guess is what I'm highlighting, is an advertising first approach rarely starts with the customer at the center of the approach. It starts with the product or the service at the center of the approach. Whereas I would argue marketing today, if your goal is to actually make an impact, there's no other way to start than having the customer, the audience at the center of your approach before anything else happens. I mean, what do you think? Does that make any sense?
There's so many ways that, and we see this in our regular lives, right? Which is, just as customers and consumers, you hear about something that solves a problem you definitely have. It doesn't take a lot of convincing for you to lean in. You kind of need some awareness. You need to speak the same language. Like a lot of times we forget that too, right? When we're talking to a specific group of people, a big enough group of people that justifies going and building a solution to a problem that they would have, that they also have ways they talk about these problems. They have ways that they engage with these problems. They have ways that they've tried to solve these problems that maybe didn't work. But you also have to show that you're relevant in the space and kind of credible to solve the problem in the first place by understanding the language they use and the behaviors that they have, so that when you do start talking to them, you don't seem like an outsider who just happens to have stumbled into this place, that you're there with purpose and intent. And I think to your point, right, you're saying, I knew what I was building before I ever got started because I found a big enough group of people with a big enough problem to them that it would make sense for me to go out and solve it, and that I am uniquely capable of solving this problem, that I'm not going to solve it in a mediocre way and take something to market that barely solves the problem in the first place, but that I understand it well enough. I've tracked them well enough so that I know what those pain points are exactly that they have. So when I say it, they're like, ooh, I need that thing. That's been the thing that's been really killing me the last 6 months. And now someone finally stepped up and fixed this or brought something to solve this problem for me. And I'm going to recognize it right away as long as they use the language that's familiar to me and that they're talking about the problem in the way that I experience that problem, right? That it's not the way they think I experience the problem or that they even assume of a problem I have. But you have enough understanding in your research to say, people like this are very likely to have this problem, and this problem is painful because of these things. And the way that they talk about and try and solve it is like this. And this fresh approach that we're taking is going to be super exciting to them. We just need to go find where they are and tell them that story. And it's not a super blinky ad, or we're trying to get people to push as many, buttons or clicks as we can on this thing. It's that I need to get access to that group of people so that I can tell them in a very credible way that I fixed something that matters to them, so that they can react, and that it's not like I'm trying to dupe them into come into my experience somehow, or I'm trying to like force a square peg in a round hole because I invented this thing and I want to go convince people to go buy it. But very specifically is, I know what it's like to have the problem you have, and it manifests itself like this, and we've solved it in this way to make it easier than ever before to get past whatever this problem might be, or satisfy this thing that you're trying to do, so that people can react to it. But you can't speak credibly about your solution to a problem if you didn't solve it in the right way to begin with. And if it doesn't seem authentic in the way that you're approaching it, then it's going to feel like I invented a thing and I'm trying to shove it into the market in some particular way, instead of being able to communicate on a very human level with people, of being like, I know what it's like to experience this problem. And so we've created a solution that fits exactly what you need to move on. And you react to that as being like, tell me more, tell me how I get this. Like, how do I be part of this? How do I tell other people about this? And then you've hit the right notes. just blasting people with high volumes of ads, hoping you're going to find the audience by doing that is a really difficult task. And the chances are, even if you catch some people in that net, you aren't authentically communicating with them. You just happen to put something in front that they tripped over. And you still have all this work to do once they land in your place to say, but did you really solve my problem? Did you really solve it in some fundamental way? Or did I just happen to see a word or an image that convinced me to click on something? And then I immediately realized these aren't the people to solve my problem. I don't know why I got this ad in the first place. And then away I go. It's all of those pieces where you really need to speak with authority about the people you are building products for. And everybody needs to know that. And then that's the kind of the extended marketing piece, whether you go into engineering or you go into sales or you go into whoever, you're like, does everybody understand who we're building this product for and why we built it this way? If everyone does know that thing, then it also unlocks more opportunities. Oh, we should be working with this brand. Those guys align this way too. Or we should be working in this marketplace. They've satisfied these exact customers. Or we should do this, this, and this, because the whole company is thinking about, I know that we built a thing. I know who we built it for. I know why we built it. Great. It's a lot easier for me to do my job when I understand the market of what we're doing here in the first place. Not just, oh, I heard somebody talking, one of my high school kids said this thing, and that must be a real problem. So I'm going to go build the solution to this. And then I go take it to market and nobody understands why I built this thing in the first place, including me, who built it on a whim.
That's right. To put a really fine point on it, because I think your description is excellent, that entire approach that you just described, that is marketing. Advertising, right, is a subset of that entire process. It's a component of it. It's that piece when it says, okay, can we deploy advertising levers and resources and budget to go bring our idea, our work to the marketplace and try to let people know it exists. So I just have to make sure that I'm being clear in that explanation, because in my mind, that is how those worlds are cemented. Is, marketing is that overall function, advertising is this subset. Maybe it's also worth repeating that advertising certainly gets a lot of coverage and swings a lot of weight, within an organization, to your point, because budget tends to flow that way. But I think it's really interesting to acknowledge what is so unique about our time right now as people who are trying to market anything, an idea, a piece of software or creative work, whatever it is that we've come a pretty long way as human beings and in a pretty dramatic fashion when it comes to just how we consume stuff, right? So if we roll the tape all the way back, let's just go all the way back and think about the Industrial Revolution, like the notion that we could suddenly make things at scale, therefore bring down the operating cost to make lots and lots of stuff. Our margins were far more attractive and profitable because we figured out how to scale operations in the factory and on the assembly line. But as a culture, we didn't come up culturally as shoppers. Like the notion of shopping, to go out and go buy things, that's like a fairly recent notion that's worth kind of reminding everybody about. Go back, 150, 200 years, whatever. There's not a lot of people that owned more than one or two pairs of shoes. You might have had, a pair of pants, perhaps two. The idea that suddenly we have this industrial revolution where factories are making a whole lot of shoes. Well, what becomes the immediate problem right after that? Well, how do we get people to suddenly want more shoes? That was not a cultural norm. People were like, no, I'm good with shoes. But in order to justify the investment of the factory and the work and ultimately the business, we needed to transform culturally into a culture of people who buy stuff, who go shopping. So you have this entire function of advertising and all this stuff start coming online. And I mention that just because the mechanism of advertising at that point in time was incredibly effective because there were not nearly as many attention-hungry animals out in the world trying to eat our attention all day long. I mean, people kind of went from zero about a product like ketchup to, oh man, look, they have ketchup. I guess I'll try ketchup. I'm probably getting the history of that wrong. But I mean, you get my point. There wasn't a whole lot of deep, intense competition for your attention to try to tell you really compelling stories about why you should go with ketchup A versus ketchup B or ketchup C. and you bring that all the way forward to today, we are nothing but surrounded by attention hungry entities all day long, eating our attention. It's like this incredibly valuable, scarce resource. And I don't need to totally drill into that because I think anyone listening to this show is probably, I would hope, of a shared mindset around just how much of our attention is being hunted constantly. But it certainly has changed the role of advertising in the context of the story of marketing, right? Because you can't just go drop a chunk of cash on one of the 3 network TV channels and know that you can interrupt people's attention while they're watching Bonanza or whatever and sell them paper towels because you know everyone's attention is there. It's just not that same way anymore. So to think that advertising is somehow macro to the topic or the concept of marketing just doesn't work today anymore. And I guess I put that forward to you because I think what we end up really talking about as marketers, or perhaps we should be talking more about, because I certainly know I've sat inside businesses and not had this conversation or wondered why we're not having this conversation, is the only leverage we have as builders who are making products and services and art to try to earn attention is to live in a world where we're not stealing it anymore. We're not just writing a check to interrupt people where they are. It just doesn't work. And to your point, if you do it and you are paying to interrupt people where they are in some other place and you are totally tone deaf, you're off the mark with your style, your aesthetic, you don't map to the culture, you don't map to it. Oh my God. Like, well, I can tell you before you push the go button that that's not going to work because you're not earning anything in that interaction. And I guess it still amazes me. And here's where I would love to hear, if you have something to drill into here. It amazes me how many times I've sat inside an organization and supposedly have been asked to have a conversation about marketing, when really what we're doing is we're talking about advertising and we're talking about how we can more effectively sculpt ads that are slightly better and maybe less painful when we interrupt people to try to convince them that they need our stuff. But we're not talking about this whole other piece.
Sometimes we make up what's acceptable, right? We might say, I'm going to spend $100,000 a month on advertising, and I want this much of a return on that spend, whatever that is. I want to get, I want to spend $100,000 and I want to generate $300,000 in sales or whatever. And then if I'm successful in that, or maybe I'm just slightly underperforming that, and I look at like, how good are we doing here? And the consensus might be, well, we need to keep looking at the ad creative. The creative's off. It's not getting us where we need to go. And so, okay, great. Who are we talking to? All right, we're talking to these people. This is the problem we're trying to solve. And even if we keep leaning into that, when we talk about how marketing and advertising has changed over the years and how it's hyper focused, we've definitely gotten into a point where we're not spending $1 to cast a super wide net and hope that we get pennies worth of value or whatever that might be out of that. And today we're saying, I can now talk to exactly the cohort, exactly the customer segment I want to talk to. I know where they are. I know where they gather. I know how they consume information. I know what my customers look like. And so therefore I know kind of where they are. And then I know how they speak and I know how they like to be spoken to. And so if I'm running my advertising campaign with the purpose fueled by my marketing engine, then I can target shoot that way, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm interrupting the people whose problem I'm most likely to be solving. And they're going to be most forgiving about that interruption because what I'm bringing to the table has value, right? Instead of being like, we've all run into this where there's some company who's just blasting the network, the internet with ads, right? They're on full tilt. They're like, it's holiday season, we're going all out. And everywhere you go, it's car insurance ads or it's whatever it is. And it's just nonstop over and over. You might have no chance of shopping for that thing. And that's not even something that's in your lane, but it's so aggressive that you're getting it everywhere. And a lot of time, the way we perceive that as consumers is annoying, right? Because you're like, wow, you've touched my life way too many times today for somebody that I'm not currently considering solving a problem for. And now your brand is starting to erode in my eyes. You're hitting me with the wrong message in the wrong place at the wrong time over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah, that might be advertising and you might be getting some results from that. But it's far from efficient. You're certainly not getting the best spend out of your dollar. But also, you're putting yourself at risk by creating a negative brand impression by your behavior in the marketplace, by saying, I don't know if you want my product or not, but please come check it out. And if I say that to you 200 times in a row, you're going to start feeling like this brand is annoying and these guys don't get it. And why would they solve my problem if they can't even figure out who to talk to about these problems? And you start building these things in your mind, right? Well, some of it's subconscious, but we all know it. We see it. We're like, oh, I can't believe this ad. I've seen this ad 17 times today. What this has nothing to do with me. Why am I getting this ad? Or maybe I bought this thing 2 weeks ago and they just won't let up. You're like, wow, I was kind of stoked when I bought this 2 weeks ago. And now you guys just don't get it, that I actually own your thing. And now I'm getting assaulted by these ads as well. And now maybe that's making me question what I did. Those are the kinds of things where it's like, we have the ability to talk to very specific groups of people when we do advertising. But if we don't do the marketing work ahead of that, we risk spoiling that entire effort and then not even really knowing what we did.
What's nested in that, listening to you talk, is a reminder that advertising, again, has a place, it has a role. It can be an effective mechanism in helping us drive awareness of our work, our art, or whatever. I mean, that's the function that it serves. But it's meant to be specifically tied to a business outcome in many cases that the business desires, right? There's a business motivation for why we're spending, why we're writing the check to go run ads in the first place. We are looking for a business outcome. We want this particular thing to go up and to the right in some way by virtue of us deciding to spend and deploy advertising to spread the awareness of our thing. But what I think is nested in there, which is a little bit tricky, is an inherited notion that in order to be effective at hitting our business goals, our advertising has to reach everybody, that we need max scale all the time. This very old school broadcast media mindset of the only way to get the outcome we hope for is to reach as many people as possible. And I would absolutely push back on that notion today. At an extreme, I am still, even though I enjoy them and it's entertaining and I get it, I am still amazed that people spend money on Super Bowl ads. I understand that it is a cultural touchstone to have a Super Bowl ad. Not to mention, it's easy for your boss to understand when you walk in the office and you're like, what are you spending the money on? We bought a Super Bowl ad. Oh, okay, great. That's easy to understand. But you are absolutely writing a check to put your thing in front of people who are guaranteed to not care about your thing. There's an enormous amount of those people. And so what I would argue consistently in the world of today is we've also got to eject this idea as people who deploy advertising that you need to reach everybody, that it has to be this unbelievably maxed out game of scale. I think that's an enormous mistake. And I see people kind of miss that piece out of the gates all the time. Some people pull it into an advertising conversation when it comes to people who are controlling the levers and turning the knobs of ad campaigns, where it's, well, let's make sure we're being mindful of our targeting and how we're segmenting things and we're mapping all of the various, attributes and blah, 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 which is important and that's fine. But just that mindset of we got to hit them all is something I just don't think is relevant anymore. I mean, I can think of lots of examples of businesses that are sustainable, doing great work, that by design are not trying to reach everybody. And I guess that's my point. I think that's actually kind of where you have to start. And I bring that up because, you and I met at a music company, right? We first started working together at Slacker Radio. I think it was 2013 for me. You had been there all the way since like the jump. I mean, how about that experience when it comes to marketing a product or a service? We were in the space of music. Who doesn't like music? And yet we still had to wrestle with all of these marketing related themes and deploy advertising and did all kinds of reps in and around those areas, in and around a topic like music, which you would think is this slam dunk of a mass appeal thing, yet it wasn't. So my question to you is, why?
Couple things on that. One is when you go by like pure brute force of just like, I am going to cover the world with my advertising campaign, whatever that might be. The other thing you risk is that you don't know what do you do with those people when they lean in? Because now I'm marketing to everyone and I don't know who's going to click on my ad. Maybe it's by accident, maybe it's intent, or maybe it's a certain type of customer that I'm aware of, but because of my ad campaign, I don't know that that's who they are. And my risk is not only that I'm wasting a whole bunch of money and maybe even annoying people that are not in my target segment, but I also don't have a great plan for them when they lean in, right? Which is like, oh, I just put this, massive appeal, big blanket message out there for the whole world to see. And yet when they arrived, because it was so untargeted and so unspecific, that I couldn't really fulfill a promise, really. I'm just like, hey, world, come see what I did. And then they come see what you did. And you're like, okay, what am I here for? And if I don't know who you
And
are,
that's acknowledging, by the way, that's acknowledging that after they heard the Legal Zoom ad or the GoDaddy ad or the Doritos ad of the Super Bowl, plenty of people did not go buy Doritos, did not go register a domain name at GoDaddy. That didn't happen. And still, you have exactly what you're
yeah,
describing.
you don't have anything for them. And so you bring up an interesting one with Slacker Radio, which again, if you were to sit and say, all right, we're going to use brute force ads, and that's how we're going to let everybody know that we built this thing. So you're like, okay, everybody who likes music, come check us out because we did some amazing things. And then you find out that not everybody that likes music likes Slacker Radio. You're like, well, why is that? Oh, well, it's online or it's on your phone. Well, that's not where I want to listen to music. Okay, so I need to cut those people out because that's not what they want to do right now. They don't want that. And they're like, oh, and there's also, the opportunity to have this amazing curated experience, and maybe there's ads and maybe there isn't. And someone's like, wow, but I'm an album person. That's all I want, just albums. Okay, well, those people maybe are not. We haven't solved their problem exactly either. Like we've solved this problem for people who like music, who also like to be able to listen on their computers and on their phones. And they really like to be able to provide as little information as possible, get the best music listening experience possible without having to really do any work or without having to build anything. I can just push buttons and cool stuff comes out. And I occasionally tell you what I like and you get better at that. And then that message starts to create, you're like, okay, well, that's what we're building. Then it's not people who like music. It's like people who do all those other things too and who value those things. And that those are the people who, if I can find those people and tell them that message and then bring them into my experience and fulfill that promise. Now I've done my marketing, leveraged my advertising, and brought in the right people, told them the right story, and maybe conducted a transaction there, or maybe at least got a listener now. But if I'd started that journey of being like, well, we brought a music service, we have all the music, so we need to go talk to all the people who like music and tell them what we did. Chances are we're going to miss way more than we hit. And if you spend time sitting there, well, our creative's just off or whatever. It's like, it's more than that, right? Because it's more than just like, well, I need a different style ad or I need to use a different word here. I need to be talking to different people and be explaining to each of them who have different value exchanges with me of why my music service is somehow valuable to them. And if it doesn't fit the mold or doesn't address the problem that they have, I am literally wasting my time trying to convince people outside that ring to come in and try my product, at least in that moment, right? Like there might be times where you say, part of my campaign is going to be to draw people from the next circle out and bring them in. Like that's my thing. And I'm going to do that with purpose. So I'm doing it with people who are curious about what I have. Maybe they kind of have this problem. It's just not acute. It's not an acute problem. It's like, it's annoying, but it's not that bad, right? Like, but maybe I can bring them over. But just this random swing, like, yeah, we have all the songs, so anyone who likes music should come here and be amazed at what we created. It just won't be the case, right? And you may disappoint a whole lot of people who even misunderstood what you asked them in the first place. And so, yes, I think you've got a responsibility to craft a story for somebody that can be told to those people, and then when they lean in, you continue the story. This is more than just an ad that exists in a place in order to hopefully catch enough people to land in your world that they convert into some meaningful way. It's at that point, you're dealing with a whole lot of luck and hope and a ton of inefficiency as well.
Well, on that topic, it's an easy stepping stone to get into the world of customer journeys. Yeah, Slacker is a super interesting example. Where my head goes is I think about how it's also important to, in the same breath, be able to say, hey, effective marketing is not about shouting the loudest to the most people possible. It's about whispering to the right people. It's about being relentlessly focused on, and I'll use the word small, but really just to as a perhaps a less effective way of saying focused. That is the more effective mindset as a marketer, is to focus on the few who actually who care, who will engage, and who will show up and participate. And they're interested. They lean in for all the reasons that you were just describing. That That's really the exercise. But it's important not to conflate, hey, small and focused with actual small, so small that it doesn't work for a business outcome. Because where my head goes while you were talking is thinking about brands who are some of the most popular in the world, and I'll process popular through the lens of Harley-Davidson because of what that logo represents to people who have literally decided to tattoo that logo on their body. Like that is the logo of a company that makes motorcycles. And that brand has such an unbelievably powerful identity. Men and women have decided to affix the logo of the company on their body for the rest of their life because that's how much it means to them. So Harley Davidson, they make a motorcycle. They're not putting ads out, right? Trying to solve the problem or let people know, hey, we have a product for you if you struggle with transportation and you don't like to get from here to there on four wheels. We have an option for you. That's not what they sell at all. And that's not really what the function of their marketing is all about. And I think of Harley I think of Harley because of the logo piece of it. I always just love that idea that people will just have the logo on them. And I think at one point I had seen, I'm probably wrong, but I had seen something at one point that said the Harley Davidson tattoo was in the top 3 or 5 like most popular tattoos on earth, which is wild to me. But I get it because boy, what an effective brand. I remember this was actually at the suggestion of the woman I mentioned who was a mentor to me in the world of radio sales, listened in on an earnings call. They had their CMO on the line. And I mean, you and I have been on calls like that before. You don't often have the CMO chime in, to talk to analysts or things like that. But in the case of Harley, it was this really awesome moment where some analyst was asking about some particular financial tied to some new product thing. There was some new engine. I know zero about motorcycles. So it was, we got this new engine. It does this thing over here and it's supposed to be great. And it was a very, very deep, detailed operational question from an analyst. And the CMO goes, do you know what we sell? And the guys in the line are this weird, awkward moment. Yeah, no, they don't. Do you know what we sell? Like, yeah, so motorcycles. It's like, no, we sell the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to dress up in black leather and ride around his neighborhood and have his neighbors be afraid of him. That's what we sell, which is why you're not going to see the Harley minivan come out next year or something like that. And I just remember hearing that going, whoa, that is awesome. What an incredibly crisp way to articulate what value you are bringing to the marketplace. And in that context, it was certainly about identity far beyond just I'm sitting on a motorcycle that I can, use as transportation to point A from point A to point B. I think of how different a marketing conversation around the table at Harley Davidson might be, knowing that you have a team of people there going, okay, that's deeply ingrained in us, that sense of who we are here to serve and who our customers really are and what value we bring. Now let's talk about the ads. Like now let's talk about what the billboard's going to look like and what the live event activation thing is going to be like and what the digital thing is going to be. It's just that kind of conversation, I think, I have to imagine must be super exciting and super engaging and a lot of lean in people because then you have this North Star sitting right there with you at the table to help shape all of those other activities.
At that point, your marketing has led you to a place that has clearly identified what your customer wants and needs from you. And another way to look at it, right? Like, so there's plenty of brands out there that don't solve the initial problem that they might have had, right? Like, so the problem of today's shoemakers is not that we've got to sell shoes to people who don't have shoes. Like that is not the task, right? Like almost in no case is the task of like, okay, our market is people without shoes and we're going to try and make sure that they have shoes. That's our goal. Most of our shoe brands, that's not what they're trying to do. And so the problem isn't that I don't have shoes. It might be I don't have the right shoes, but it also might be that I don't have the shoes that represent me in the way that I want to represent myself to the marketplace, right? So in a Harley, it could be the Harley versus the Kawasaki versus the whatever, right? Like, is it, or my Honda? It's like, I'm making a decision now, not because of that it's transportation, but now it's how does this product represent me in the world, right? Like I'm choosing this because now I want to align with a product that doesn't just solve my problem, but it also, the problem I've defined is not that the product doesn't do its core thing, which is transportation in a motorcycle, but it's conveying something to the market, to the rest of the people in the market of the decision I made to pick this thing. And so when we get into that part of it, and again, our ads are the tool that tell our product story to the people who are eager to hear it, right? And then our marketing is what defines the product. Our marketing defines the customer segment. Our marketing defines the story. Our marketing defines the problem. And the problem is really important because it may not be the thing we think it is, right? Like, so it may not be that our motorcycle is transportation or our shoes cover our bare feet. It might be that the problem that we're solving in the marketplace is how that person presents themselves to the rest of the world. And that they're looking for, yes, it needs to be transportation, but it also needs to align with my values and my identity and the image that I'm putting out in the marketplace. And if I can't find a product that represents that, that's a problem. I have a problem as a customer, which is there isn't a shoe out there, there isn't a motorcycle out there, there isn't a car out there that makes me feel the way I want to feel when I'm enjoying it. There actually might be a problem that's very different than what the core of the product is really built for, but there's still a problem. And it's my job as the marketer to understand that problem well enough that not only can it inform the product I build, it informs the story I tell, and it informs the people I tell it to.
I love that. And sneakers are a great example. You are a sneaker guy. I mean, I own sneakers, but I mean, you are a sneaker guy. Just to put a fine point on other things that you put in that bucket of marketing that are not advertising is think of having an interaction with customer service after you've purchased a product or a service that felt to you like it was packaged and presented a certain way and was meant to make you feel a certain way. And then you need to interact with customer service and that interaction doesn't quite align, with your expectations or whoever's in the showroom. I mean, these are all extensions of the exercise of marketing. If I go into Harley-Davidson and somebody is trying to sell me a bike who looks like my mom, who's a lovely person, but is going to look like a middle school English teacher, I might not feel as great about buying the Harley, perhaps. And so I'm thinking of all these other things that maybe get left out of the conversation when we talk to clients or we work with businesses or the rooms we've been in before, where you just you gloss over all these other functions or these activities that definitely are tied to marketing, but they don't get the same airtime as the ad does or the advertising does. And it reminds me of a lawn care provider who one of the things in a conversation that I believe we were having, one of the attributes we identified as a potential area to maybe plus up the experience was they ran a franchise location out in the world that did not have a really great looking lawn out in front of the franchise location. And it was in a pretty high trafficked area, right? Like a lot of cars going by. And I remember sitting around that table going, well, there might be some value in the lawn in front of the lawn care business looking like the most kick-ass lawn you have ever seen. Like that lawn should look outstanding because that sort of sends a signal to the world around it of the kind of experience you deliver. So that's where my head just goes listening to you riff right there is how many, what are some other examples of activities, behaviors, touch points within a business that can absolutely be considered, based on our conversation here, a marketing oriented activity or touch point, glossed over, left out, not put on the table.
I mean, really, it's anything your customer is going to interact with in so many ways, right? Like that's a broad way to state it. But when you're looking at through a marketing lens, you're looking at everything that your customer, any way that they engage with you, your brand, your product, your company, extensions of those things, all you have marketing juice in all of that stuff. And a lot of times we have to decide where do we invest in those experiences? Which of those things are going to tickle that delight in a customer that's going to make them go like, oh, yeah, that was a good thing. Like whatever that was, that was cool. And we've all done it, right? I've bought products where I was fascinated by the packaging and was like sharing it with people. Look at this packaging. This is amazing. Like, they did an incredible job. Or look at the setup instructions for this thing. Brilliant. They nailed this thing. Or look how cool this thing looks. Or all the things that we do when we go through that experience. And to your point, it extends to every one of those touch points. Whether I call customer service or I send an email or I go to the website and look for something, or I'm in a forum that's managed and curated by these places, or their socials or whatever else it might be. I'm looking at those are all signals for me as to being like, does this brand, product, company, service understand me? Am I part of this as some kind of a community in some way, as other people who want this solution that are looking for things like this? And do I feel kind of part of that? And do I feel like they get me? Right. Like, and in so many ways, that's where we really drop the ball is on one of those touch points. And we saw a lot of companies get a lot of backlash from this with the way that call centers were handled and, whether it was offshore stuff or just hiring agencies and organizations that didn't totally understand you and your customers that are representing your brand every time somebody needs to talk to you and how difficult that is. And we're seeing a lot of pivots on some of that stuff right now too. This idea that it's you can't have one great shiny thing and then the rest of the experience falls down, right? I can't have a really slick ad and I don't fulfill the promise anywhere else. I can't have a really great landing page and everything else is terrible, or like whatever it might be. I have to invest in all of those touch points in a way that my target customer is going to value and measure and evaluate, and provide feedback and share with others, and how they judge how well did this company live up to the promise they made me with what they offered. And it can't ever just be one or two or even three of these things. Is that you have to look across your entire organization. Where are customers interacting with me, my brand, my products, my solutions, including, that touches your ads, it touches your website, it touches your communities, it touches your service, it touches your nurturing campaigns, your engagement campaigns, your follow-up stuff. Everything you do has to walk that walk. It has to live up to that promise that you made. That's a task that's never done. Anybody who's living in marketing, you do that every day. That's your job. You show up and you make all those things better, in some capacity or another.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah, this isn't a task that you set up in front of you and just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an ongoing exercise because the market is always changing, culture changes. That's really the probably the biggest thing in my opinion. Is culture is always going to evolve. So therefore the narratives are going to evolve. They're going to get more complex. They're going to collide with other cultural narratives and suddenly remix into this whole other new thing, and that is the job of the marketer. As to what degree do you have your finger on the pulse of those cultural beats and those changes, and to what degree can you continue to tell a story that is going to resonate and ultimately activate the people you seek to serve in a very real way. Can't be BS. It's not going to work. So here's a question then. How do you measure the effectiveness then of all that activity? Because what I feel is a common mistake is we go do all this stuff and then we go, all right, what's the ROI? Well, how's it doing? How are we doing on those things? Is it just the cash register ringing? How do you go, we're doing a good job. Here's why.
Frankly, a lot of organizations probably don't look at enough, as what they measure, right? So everybody looks at revenue. So you're going to have that somewhere your revenue number is, whether you get that hourly, daily, on the minute, monthly, wherever you're getting your revenue number from, you're tracking that. Anybody who's kind of running a business tracking revenue. The other one we tend to track, because again, we talk about ad spend being a big number, is okay, how much are we spending on advertising? How many people did we touch, right? That could be impressions or clicks or however we want to capture whatever layer we're looking at in that, through that lens, that first step. How many did we get out to? And so some people really stop there. They're like, all right, I know how much I'm spending and I know I'm getting 10,000 people a month to interact with my stuff. And then I'm also selling $500,000 worth of stuff every month. And those numbers feel okay to me. So that's what we're going to use. Okay. And as crazy as that sounds to just be like, this feels reasonable, that a lot of times we don't actually really validate that, right? Like, is that the right amount of spend and touch points that we're getting? Is this the right conversion to revenue that we're actually getting? Is like, if they both check out, or if they feel light, then what we do is be like, all right, well, let's make those two numbers better in some way, right? We're going to make the marketing more efficient, where we're going to spend less, and then we're going to get more revenue over here. Those are the new goals. We want revenue to go up, we want ad spend to go down, or something similar to that, or at least the conversion rate to stay the same. But the part we tend to miss is all the stuff in the middle. And yeah, there's people with, you're going to have some organizations that monitor the hell out of this stuff. They got metrics for every little drop off along the thing, and that's great. But that's not super common. It is very, very common, especially even at the mid to upper levels of the organization, where they're so focused on a couple of KPIs. So they need kind of key performance thing that says, all right, well, dollars are kind of in line with forecast and spends kind of in line with forecast. So good job, team. Or they're not. It's a bad job, team. Right. And yet Why? So okay, are we marketing to the wrong people, and are we spending ads in wasteful places, or is our creative subpar? Is it not telling our story well? But then also, once those people do lean in, it's not in almost all cases, it's not run an ad and then ring the cash register. There's stuff that happens in the middle, and the stuff in the middle on that journey we have to have some metrics for. Is like, if I'm moving people into these phases, where are they getting stuck? Like, where are they not moving on to the way I would expect them to? Because that's where I'm going to want to wrench on, especially first, is like, where's the soft spot in my journey from brand awareness to cash register ring? There's pieces in the middle where people are getting stuck. Their journey is getting rerouted. They're getting confused. There's friction in there that maybe doesn't belong. But very, very often we look at the very front, and at the very bottom are the numbers that everybody kind of thinks about and talks about. And that's like fresh in our heads. And yet the stuff in the middle is where you can really get the most gains. And a lot of times it's because we've lost our way. We forgot about the story after we did the brand engagement. We forgot who we were talking to and what matters to them. We forgot what kind of things scare them when it comes time to ask them for money, right? Like, I don't even believe this is a real company. Like, a lot of us do that now, right? We've now been trained to be like, hold on a minute, this might not even be a real company. Like, I have to now go research to go figure out, have other people given this company money and got real things or not? And now I have that. I'm always evaluating, right? Like, how I don't know this brand. I'm coming in with a tremendous amount of skepticism, and all of that has to be kind of made possible for me to resolve through that whole process. And yet, again, when we measure, we tend to measure the big things, the big revenue and the big ad spend are the things we look at, because there's a lot of dollars associated with those things. But if we want to be able to spend less to get more, or we want to be able to drive revenue up with the tools we have, got to focus on the stuff in the middle, because that's where you're going to be like, oh, there's obstacles all over the place in here, and there's entire phases of this that we kind of forgot, or we talk about this in our advertising, we never ever mention it the whole rest of the journey again. Like, that's a problem. Like, and those inconsistencies come back to the idea of marketing is the whole organization. Is that anybody who's involved in the product or the customer has to have their marketing hat on, because whenever it crosses your desk, there's an opportunity there to improve the marketing experience of whatever's happening there. And if we don't, it's always whatever the next thing is. Got to get a new product out the door. We got to get new ad campaigns running. We got to measure the revenue of the new thing, and then we decide if it's good or not. And then we either throw more dollars at it, or we reset our expectations. But the reality is, you got to have the whole organization focused on each of those steps, and always be finding the weakest link and shoring it up. That's one of the fastest ways to start making progress. You'd be like, oh, we had a really ugly thing in our whole process right here where there's a massive disconnect. All right, let's fix that. All right, now the other ugly thing that's next to that is this thing. Let's fix that. And keep tuning and tweaking, because chances are some companies are exceptional at this stuff. We all know who they are because a lot of them advertise to us every day. Their bread and butter is turning products and solutions into really, really compelling stories, putting it in front of the exact right people, and then that entire journey through that transaction is seamless, and you feel good about it. And when we have those, we know it, right? We're like, that brand's awesome at that. These guys kill it at this stuff. These guys are really good at these things. We remember those things. We share that stuff. We talk about it. But I think more often than not, and I would certainly challenge just anybody who's listening, I'd love to hear if there's some that you love or some that you hate. But I find myself personally more disappointed than delighted in all of my various commerce transactions I'm going. It was like, oh, yeah, this isn't really what they said they were going to do. Or, oh, like, I don't even understand what they're asking me to do here. This is weird. Or, oh, this product wasn't what I hoped it would be. Or, oh, they dropped the ball on customer service. Or all these various things were like, yeah, wasn't what I hoped. Like, the ad person did their job, and then nobody else did. And so the whole marketing engine was off, right? There was just enough to inform the initial story that then fell apart along the way somewhere. But that entire process is run by the marketing engine. And the marketing engine needs to be running really, really well. And it needs to be affecting all of those things. If you've got any of those wires disconnected, it's going to feel that way. Like, when I show up, I'm like, oh, you got steps 1 and 2. That was great. But everything after that was just a complete mess. And I left.
I think that's an incredibly well laid out opportunity for anybody who's operating a business, running a team. The fact that there's so much low-hanging fruit in terms of value by just focusing on those middle bits, to your point, that's an enormous opportunity. The thing I would pile on to that is by the way, that effort is not just going to organically materialize out of the blue. It's going to require somebody to own, or a group of people to own, that track of work. So if you're fortunate enough to be a CMO, or you have that as somebody on your team, that's the gig. I mean, that's the gig in many ways, is to own that entire scope of activity. And to your point, everyone in the organization has a hand in it at some level. Your job, if you're the one sort of at the controls, is to make sure the organization understands that. You continue to beat that drum, and you kind of own that stack of work. And ultimately you understand that there's value in focusing on all of that stuff, especially, to your point, the middle bits. But I would also say, boy, what an enormous opportunity for a junior level person to make a real impact in an organization, to be the person who could sit in the meeting, to show up regardless of where you sit in on the org chart, or in the chain of command, and go, hey, you know what? I'm the one who will care about this, or I'm the one who's willing to show up and point out these various pieces of the customer journey that seem slightly less than, for the reasons I'm going to share with everybody. I mean, boy, oh boy, what a fantastic way to very quickly make an impact in an organization or as a part of a team, no matter what, seat on the bus that you're in. If you're the person willing to say, no, I care a lot about this whole kind of middle bit of work, that you were just describing.
And just another quick one there is, yes, as a CMO or equivalent, your job is absolutely to own that entire process. Everything that in any way is built for a customer or presented to a customer or engaging with a customer, you own that. And you need to make sure you take accountability for that. And part of that is, just to lean into that, is having those folks on your team that can take owner of the various segments of things, right? So you don't take your eye off of anything. It's impossible for one person to be like, I'm going to own this and I'm going to make sure that all this is run perfectly. It's not, not possible, but it's an unnecessarily difficult task when you're going to have people in your team and in your organization who really do know this stuff. Like, oh, the landing pages, I get. Like, I absolutely want to own all the. Once somebody comes to the website, I want that. Give me that. Or I want to be the person who's the live agent that's going to walk them through all the consulting stuff that they're going to need. I think that'd be fun. I'd like to be able to set that up. I want to own that piece, that engagement on there. There's going to be people in your organization. I love that you mentioned a junior person. It's a great way to create value for yourself inside of an organization, is to grab those things. Yeah, I'll go do that, because it's effort. It's mostly an effort job. So if you have effort and passion in those roles, you can do great work, because it's just a matter of being like, what do we need to do right here to make sure that it's the best thing for the customer and the best thing for the business in this moment? And I'm going to own that. And that as the CMO, I own the aggregate of this whole thing. But I know that someone on the team has that in their job, is to say, I own this piece. I own engagement. I own awareness. I own conversion. I own follow-up support. I own ongoing nurturing and retention, or churn prevention, or pick your thing. You got somebody who's tracking that and understands the mechanics of what causes it. They understand the levers that they can pull. They understand our level of goodness in that today and what we aspire to be, and a goal to shoot for. Like we've talked about with metrics, it's like, is 5% the right thing here, or 10% or 15%? Like, somebody needs to go through and understand what's going on there to say, yeah, I don't think it can even be theoretically higher than this, but we need to shoot for this target that we're going to do. And with that level of ownership, it ensures that you just don't drop the ball. Every day, everybody's working at leveling up. There is no perfect, right? Everything changes too fast. Customers are changing, culture's changing, market's changing, competitors, all the stuff's changing. And you're going to need to change and view that through, as you view through your product roadmap and what you're doing. But in the execution of the marketing side of things, everybody needs to be paying attention. Everybody needs to have a certain level of expertise. You might be an owner. You might be somebody who's on the delivery side of that, but you need owners for everything, and you need people to be able to deliver against those things. And then you need to be able to, CMO then can say, I can help prioritize all these things so that we're doing it all in the right order and we're allocating our resources in the right way, but we're removing all those blind spots. And that's really, really important, is that if you're not focused on any of those things in particular, then you may not be focused on anything other than whatever your super high level KPI is, and say revenue is 450. We were hoping for 440. So we didn't really do it. And that doesn't tell much of a story at all.
Which, by the way, I think just underscores the point of why advertising, as both a word and an activity, often wins the lion's share of energy in an organization, because that certainly is a cleaner, more straightforward definition of the job, to create and push out advertising when we think about marketing. When unfortunately the irony is it's actually everything you just described. And that structure of how you would build a team to own and manage and run those activities requires exactly what you were just articulating. To go back to the kind of junior person opportunity, just to pin on a reminder that always is in my head when it comes to delivering value as an individual within a team or a part of an organization. Never forget that many companies are not crazy about letting value just flow for no reason, or compensation flow for no reason. Companies are not always thrilled to go dole out higher salary, more options, more benefits, but they are very eager to give out responsibility. You can often grab responsibility far easier than you can just go grab compensation. So it's a great, a great opportunity to again make a mark. I think we're near the end here. Where my head is after all of this is okay. So you've got me. Maybe you've got me in a different headspace listening to you guys talk about what marketing is as a whole versus just that small component of advertising. So what am I supposed to do with this now? What am I supposed to do with this? And let's say I'm trying to build a thing, or I'm a part of a team that's trying to build a thing, or I'm a entrepreneur, solo person trying to do something, or I'm an artist. I'm trying to just get my ideas out into the world and get those things to spread. What are you guys saying is the prescription here? If I'm on board with the definition of marketing, and I'll take a quick stab at it and throw it to you. I think where I would go is remind yourself that you don't need everyone, that there's not a lot of value in trying to scream the loudest and reach everyone. There's an enormous amount of value in starting with who am I for? Who is the smallest, most focused group of people that I feel really confident I can not only understand their problems and what they struggle with, but how my unique capabilities and abilities and products and service or whatever actually helps to relieve pain or add value or add pleasure or joy. How much do I really have an understanding of the customer, of the audience? I would say that's what we're saying, that really marketing is not about you, right? It's about them. So you have to start with that kind of at the center. Beyond that is, how are we going to measure things that are not revenue, especially if you're just starting out when that revenue might not be there as an early builder or somebody who's just getting something off the ground? How else are we going to measure the effectiveness of our activity? I think of things like shareability, sharing. Are people talking about you? Have you brought something to the marketplace that has somebody else go, dude, you've got to hear about this? Or have you heard about? Or dude, this thing is happening. I mean, that's a great way to measure, oh, I'm making an impact. Is my thing worth talking about? Is it worth telling the others that, that have engaged with my thing? And then once there is activity with that audience, what are you doing to continue to nurture and invest in those relationships? What are you doing to build trust? So somebody starts to actually interact with you or your content or your product or your service. What systems, what people, what energy and activities are you putting in place to continue to water that relationship and build trust and interact? So that's sort of customer first, customer at the center, being thoughtful and empathetic about the journey that they're on and the problem that you can actually uniquely solve for them. Getting comfortable with not having to be for everybody. And in fact, you should absolutely not come out of the gates thinking you are for everybody. Realizing that once activity starts to present itself, you got to lean in and start to engage with those people and have to do some sort of activity that allows you to be consistent over time, because that's how you build trust. And that's how ultimately people are going to feel like there's a real relationship that they can support, whether it's commercial, commerce, or whatever. And I think that's kind of the stack of entry level marketing frames. I guess maybe the last one is that.
Well, let me try and put a bow on that from my side, because I agree with you on what you just said there. I think the one piece that might be missing is ownership. So we have spoken about that, but when you look across your organization, your role, whatever your role may be, you might be a very senior person in the organization who's in charge of marketing. So you got all this stuff to look after. You might be a person who's on that team, wherever you might fit in that, or you might be somebody who's adjacent to that team, maybe sales or product, being adjacent to kind of the overall marketing group. But looking at ownership is really important. You got to understand, where are all your customer touch points? Yes, advertising is one, but you have so many other ones. You have your, whatever your social platforms you might be leaning into. You might have your website. You might have your mobile or your mobile app. You might have blogs. You might have video content. You might have other ways that you're communicating, email, and other ways that you're communicating with folks. But there's touch points all over the place, both for the who are we building this solution for? What do they care about? How do we talk to them? When we talk to them, how do we talk to them? Where do we talk to them? And someone needs to own all of those things. They may not need to all be all owned by one person, but there needs to be ownership assigned to all of those things. Or what you're going to end up with is the assumption that those are being taken care of in your marketing organization. And more often than not, if the assumption is that those things are being handled, they're not being handled. It is a committee who is stretched thin, who is trying to shift resources around, who probably has limited prioritization, and is be like, it's going to be the squeaky wheel that gets my attention today, or whatever fire is burning today, or just whatever thing I think I need to be working on. And if everybody's doing that, it's going to be a very piecemeal marketing approach. Your customers will feel it. You will too. And if you want your customers to feel like you have a seamless experience, a marketing engine that's powering what you're doing, then you have to have ownership across your organization to all the touch points. If something isn't owned, it is not being attended to in the way that it needs to be. And that ownership should know, what constitutes success? What do I need to do in this step to be a credible player in this lane, whatever I'm doing? And that if you don't have the right people doing that, shift it around. But also look for the people who get enthusiastic about that stuff. You might find somebody who desperately would love to own a piece of the marketing engine if given the opportunity. And that's a great way to find kind of superstars in the making in your organization, or certainly people with high ceilings, is this idea that like, who wants to own, this piece in our marketing engine? And you might have some folks that jump right up. Yeah, give it to me. I'll take it. That sounds great. Look for those people. They're looking for your customers' benefit. But yeah, that's might be the last piece I think I would add to the way you framed it up there, Jamie, is that knowing who owns all the different touch points is really important, because if you don't know who owns it, then nobody owns it.
100%. I think that's it. I think that's the show. I think we are all marketers now. That's the big takeaway. You did not think you were a marketer when you started the episode. You just listened to us zig and zag for an hour all over the place about marketing stuff. Hopefully you bring it all back around and say, okay, I guess we're all marketers. And that's absolutely, my takeaway. Jonathan, I always appreciate being able to talk to you, man. This is Slackers. I'm Jamie.
I'm Jonathan.
If the show inspired anything for you today, or you have questions, or you want to reach out, say hello. We love it when people say hello. Please check the show notes. You can find Jonathan and I both online. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.